Welcome to my series on Lake Louise. If you're new, allow me to provide a brief recap. I have four art mediums that I'm fairly comfortable with: pencils, ink, watercolor paint, and acrylic paint, and I wanted to put my skills with each of them to the test. So I picked a reference photo of Lake Louise, which is in Alberta, Canada, and I am attempting to paint and draw that photo in the four different mediums. This is part two. While I was creating this piece, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to say about it, because all in all, this was a pretty enjoyable process. Aside from a 2 week long break I took in the middle of this drawing, it actually came together pretty seamlessly. So while I was staring at my screen, attempting to come up with something, anything, to say about this project, but coming up dry, I decided to put it on the back burner and go start another art project. But that's when it hit me. Sometimes you need to take a break to get a little bit of a new perspective. If a project isn't turning out how I want it to, but I can't figure out why, typically after an appropriately timed break, I can come back and figure it out since I have different creative juices flowing through my mind. I don't mean to encourage procrastination, at least not entirely, because in all honesty, I'm completely guilty of taking a break until a deadline dictates that I get the project done. This isn't that kind of a project, though. This is a passion project that's meant to be enjoyable. So in this case, when the task became frustrating instead of enjoyable, I put it to the side. And, after taking a little bit of a break, I was able to come back with a few things to say about this project. First off, I actually really like how it turned out. I think it captured the look of Lake Louise, even though there's no color incorporated. In comparison with the watercolor painting, I was mostly able to get the correct shape of the mountains in this one. Also, I found it a lot easier to get the mountains to a point where I was happy with them, and I think that was probably because in painting, you have to incorporate several different shades of a color and differing colors to create depth. Plus, when you're looking at a reference photo and can see the colors that are actually there, it can make it difficult to pivot when the colors maybe don't end up in the exact spot you want, or the exact shade you want. At least, that was my experience. As for the pros and cons of this medium compared to watercolor, first off, I just feel a lot more comfortable with this medium for this particular application. I can create watercolor cards fairly easily, but watercolor landscapes are a bit of a different beast. The watercolors cover the page a lot quicker than the pencil does, which is kind of nice, but you also have to take the time to let the watercolor dry, which isn't always my forte. Also, because of where my skills are at, I think I can get a lot more detail with my pencils than with my watercolor. Even though I might consider the final product of the pencil drawing a greater success, I really enjoyed the process of both of these projects a lot, and can definitely see a scenario where I lean towards doing a watercolor landscape over a pencil one. If there has to be a con, or something I slightly dislike about this particular project, it would be the way I drew my trees. Not because they look terrible, but because I think there could be a technique that turned out just a little bit better. I'll have to look into that for the next drawing. But all in all, I would say it's a pretty productive afternoon in the art studio. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.